Keep it up.
I like boxes. Guys, one more box, then we'll watch something funny, and then we'll go games. Yo, you're nuts, dude! I was there earlier. Thanks, no, that's the end, dude. Episode did.
No shit, Twitch was banned in China.
Yes, it is.
I have
really
to get
backed
a
up.
VPN to watch you at the resolution of 360p to sub to donate.
What are you doing at this
50.
time?
So could you play my Gimme Love?
Playing Ghost of Tsushima.
Sag.
The ones from the 70s are Boxy, and the ones from the 90s are Curvy.
It's for
some
safety.
car models, you can even tell the exact year when that change happened. Just look at this commercial for the Buick LeSabre, showing the 1991 model, and then the 1992 model.
The 1992 LeSabre.
See the curves?
That's
Let's
like
watch
a
that
piece
again.
of shit.
91 is Boxy, with sharp edges.
It looks like a drug dealer car.
Smooth and round. And since then, cars have become curvier and curvier. So how did this happen? When manufacturers started making curvy cars in the 90s, it wasn't a totally new concept. Back in the 1930s, streamliners like this Chrysler Airflow used a sleek design to reduce wind resistance.
That looks pretty baller, though.
As the 50s and 60s rolled around, American streamliners stopped selling well. They were outsold by bigger, boxier cars. And gas prices were on a fairly steady decline at this point, so streamlining for fuel efficiency was less of a concern. Well into the 1970s, just about every car made in America had sharp edges and very few curves. They were basically designed as a series of 3 boxes: the hood, the cabin, and the trunk. And that model worked really well in the US market. But in Europe, fuel was always more expensive. In the 60s, a gallon of gas in France cost a whopping 73.1 cents, while it was just 31 cents in the US. So European designers started experimenting with more aerodynamic designs to help cars move more easily, so they'd waste less gas. Automakers like Porsche and BMW and Audi and Mercedes-Benz, they all started rolling out car models that had curved exteriors. And eventually, American automakers started to copy the European aerodynamic look to try to attract upscale customers. The mass market was a different picture. In Europe, a designer named Uwe Bonsen was the first person to push for a curved design for the average driver, and he did that with the 1982 Ford Sierra. It was curvier than any car in its class at the time, but critics just laughed at it, and it didn't sell very well at first. It was nicknamed the Jelly Mold because of how much it looked like the kind of circular shape you'd make Jell-O with. But one of the designers from that European Ford design team, this guy, Jack Telnack, took over the US design team in 1980. American gas prices at this point were skyrocketing due to conflict in the Middle East, so Telnack brought wind tunnel testing into the design process. He first did that with the 1983 Ford Thunderbird, but the real breakthrough came a few years later.
The result was the groundbreaking 1986
That
Ford
looks like
Taurus.
a piece of
It might not
shit.
look that groundbreaking now, but this style was revolutionary at the time. It was a mass market car with curvy edges, and
what the
people
fuck is
liked
that?
it.
Taurus, now a North American car with the shape and the feel we've never seen before. Taurus.
They used it in RoboCop as the car of the future. And the sales basically saved Ford, which had really been struggling at the time. And it inspired a whole wave of copycat curvy cars. And streamlining became even more popular because manufacturers were facing new fuel economy regulations in the US. Starting in 1978, the average fuel efficiency of each manufacturer's passenger cars had to meet higher and higher levels. According to one Ford designer, aerodynamic design was a much more affordable way to boost efficiency than doing engineering work under the hood. The rise of computer modeling in the 80s also made it easier for car makers to design and manufacture curved lines.
Wait.
All these years later,
is that a stylus? I think on the PC.
Curved lines. All these years later, the influence on today's cars is pretty clear. Even the models that we criticize for being ridiculously boxy these days, like the Scion XB, are actually really round. And if our modern day sci-fi movies...
Guys, let's be honest, chat. This exists, but who the fuck buys this shit? God, what is that? It looks like a thing you put soap in.
And if our modern day sci-fi movies have anything to say about it, that won't be changing anytime soon.
Soccer mom, Karens, psychos. I think that's the market for that. I'll just.
I've lived in the United States since
Chat.
2010.
Alexa,
this is actually a good question, I think.
what's the weather today?
What's time for you? It's 7:47.
It's 65 degrees with clear skies and sun. Today's forecast has partly sunny weather with a high of 77 degrees and a low of 61 degrees.
Chat, let's do a vote. Type 1 in chat for Celsius, type 2 for Fahrenheit. Yeah, Celsius all the fucking way, dude. Fahrenheit is for fucking hunchback cucklords. Dude, what is wrong with you?
I still don't understand the use of Fahrenheit. Virtually every country on Earth uses Celsius to measure temperature, but the US still uses Fahrenheit. And for that reason, we at Box often get comments like these. Okay, get it. Besides the fact that the majority of the world uses it, the metric system makes conversions a lot easier. The Celsius scale even looks simpler. It has freezing and boiling points at nice round numbers.
See?
0 and 100. Where in Fahrenheit, it's a bit of a mess. And of course, this isn't just an issue of aesthetics or weather updates. America's unwillingness to switch over to the metric system has had serious consequences. In 1999, a $125 million satellite sent to Mars disappeared in the Martian atmosphere.
It's a setback to years of work already done. In the vastness of space, all it takes is one navigation error.
And this colossal mistake was largely due to a conversion error between US and metric measurements. Fahrenheit was really useful in the early 18th century. At the time, no one really had a consistent way to measure temperature. But then a German scientist came up with the Fahrenheit scale
Guys, you guys can make fun of NA all you want, okay, chat? Everybody's asleep right now.
He invented the mercury thermometer
asleep.
in 1714. To make this scale, the most popular theory is that he picked the temperature of an ice-water-salt mixture at the 0 mark. He then put the freezing point of water, which is higher than a salt mixture at 32, and placed the average temperature of the human body at 96. From there, he placed a boiling point of water at 212 degrees. In 1724, Fahrenheit formalized that scale and was inducted into the British Royal Society, where his system was a big hit. As Britain conquered huge parts of the globe in the 18th and 19th centuries, it brought the Fahrenheit system and other imperial measurements such as feet and ounces along with them. And Fahrenheit became a standard system for the British Empire across the globe. In the meantime, the metric system was gaining popularity.
Guys, how much of all this do they still have? All this, they got all those crazy territories, and did they keep?
Meantime, the metric system was gaining popularity during the French Revolution. It was put in place to unify the country at the national level. So by the second half of the 20th century, Celsius became popular in many parts of the world, when many English-speaking countries began using the metric system. Even America attempted to switch over. The change would have been good for trade and scientific communications with the rest of the world. So Congress passed a law, the 1975 Metric Conversion Act, which led to the United States...
Guys, stop saying you guys get Canada, okay? Listen, guys. The only thing you have is the Queen's head on the fucking, on the 25 cents and the 10 cents. Apart from that, that's about it.
That would educate people about the system. This created the only metric highway sign in the US, the Interstate 19 connecting Arizona to Mexico. But it didn't go much further than that. The problem was that unlike the UK, Canada, or Australia, the law made the switch voluntary instead of mandatory. And of course, people resisted the change and the metric board couldn't enforce the conversion. So President Reagan ended up disbanding the board in 1982. The next nudge to Metricate came when the metric system became the preferred measure for American trade and commerce in 1988, but nothing really stuck with the general public, even though bizarre measurements like feet and Fahrenheit are not doing them any favors. Students have to train for 2 sets of measurements, making science education even more difficult. And companies spend extra dollars producing 2 sets of products, one for the US and the other for metric. There's also an argument for public health. According to the CDC, about 3,000 to 4,000 kids are brought to the ER due to unintentional medication overdose every year. And conversion errors for dosage are to blame. So it seems like a no-brainer. America needs to switch to the metric system to match the rest of the world. But it is still struggling to make that change. That's because it'll take a lot of time and money, but there's no financial proof that this will all be worth it. So unless that change is proven to be economically better, we're not going to be using Celsius anytime soon.
What's 77 Fahrenheit in Celsius?
77 degrees Fahrenheit is 25 degrees Celsius.
Ah.
How tall am I? I'm 6'2". Ah, you got me. I'm going, dude.